Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to my channel. My name is Barbara, and today we're going to be looking at Pluto in Virgo. So very excited to be starting this Pluto series because Pluto as a planet rules an entire generation. So the way that I see Pluto is that it's that particular generation's karma that they all incarnated together to heal and to clear. So Pluto in Virgo basically started in 1957 and then it exited Virgo in 1972. The way Pluto works as a planet is that it enters a sign for a particular time, leaves retrograde into the old sign, and then officially enters for a longer period of time until it exits into the new sign and then comes back retrograde. So you might have people who are born in the same year, but some of them could have been Pluto in Leo retrograde, okay, especially if it's at the beginning, and then officially Pluto in Virgo, or on the end, you could have people who entered Libra and then went back Virgo, okay, and then officially entered Libra. So because there has to be a cutoff at some point, this is the cutoff, okay, even if you have Pluto in Virgo retrograde, technically you would fall under this generation's karma that you're working through. And actually it's a little bit harder for you if you have Pluto in Virgo retrograde, because retrograde basically gives any planet a little bit more challenge with seeing that particular lesson clearly, okay? And it makes sense actually when you look at it astrologically, because probably a lot of people who are in your year that you were born into are Pluto in Libra, let's say, for example, and then it went back retrograde into Pluto in Virgo. So if you're tuning in and you have Pluto in Virgo, basically what we're going to be looking at is Pluto as a planet is all about transformation. So it's going to be transforming whatever sign that it's in. So in this particular case, it's in Virgo. So it's going to take on any Virgo-like quality. So people who are born under this generation, it's all to do with health, healing, being of service, okay, all these sorts of things. And as usual, you have a light side and you have a shadow aspect to every single sign. So basically what this generation incarnated to do is that they're here to clear any karma around, again, sacrifice, okay? This is a huge thing with this generation, feeling like you have to sacrifice yourself for other people, sacrifice your needs for other people. This is a huge thing with this generation that they're clearing. And also in terms of, again, you want to be of service in the light aspect, okay? So the light aspect is you're helping everybody and you're helping those around you, but the sacrifice, quote unquote, and the shadow aspect is, again, you're putting others' needs in front of your own. So there's a huge thing that this generation basically incarnated to clear and to learn is to be of service, but in a way that you're not putting yourself, okay? It's not at the expense of yourself. That's a huge thing for Virgo to learn as a sign. They're very huge healers. They're huge healers and they're very psychic, okay? So Virgo basically bounces off of Pisces because they are oppositions. So Virgo is an earth sign, so they're very good at basically taking visions that they have and applying it in this earth plane. Pisces is a sign, they're more spiritual, so they're more up in the clouds. Virgo is going to take that knowledge and basically apply it, okay, in the everyday circumstance. So a lot of people who were born in this generation probably were really good at manifesting in that sense, building, okay, creating on this earth plane. They probably accumulated a lot of wealth, okay, because again, they were very good at operating on the earth plane because they are an earth sign, first of all, but also because they have that vision and they're able to put that into action. So a lot of people who were in this generation could have been really interested in, let's say, careers or jobs around health or healing. The preliminary stages of health and healing could have been a huge focus for people in this generation. Their health in general could have been a huge focus. So the shadow aspect of health and healing is being a hypochondriac, which is interesting actually because a lot of people who were born in this generation actually lived through the AIDS pandemic. Okay, now we're living through another one, but they lived through the AIDS pandemic. So what's interesting is basically that Virgo fear. Okay, so the deep-rooted fear of the Virgo is to be a hypochondriac, got triggered with the AIDS pandemic, and I'm sure it got triggered again with this new pandemic as well. So that's a huge thing that generation is clearing, okay, as a whole, is this fear around health. Even with Virgo as a sign, what tends to happen with them is they tend to basically find, let's say, like a diet that they like and just stick to that diet, okay? They tend to be very like particular, okay, in absolutely everything. A huge thing also that this generation is clearing is anything to do with perfectionism, okay? So Virgo is known to be as the perfectionists of the zodiac. They want everything to be perfect. They basically spend more time perfecting something rather than actually putting it out there. So the shadow aspects of this is being overly critical, okay? So that's a huge thing with this generation, is that they're learning to not be overly critical, not only with other people, but with themselves as well, okay? So what's interesting is the generation preceding them was Pluto in Leo, and this is kind of the generation where sex, drugs, and rock and roll was just starting out. And then a lot of Pluto in Virgo probably was on this train, and then kind of the AIDS pandemic put a halt to that, okay? Especially that whole consciousness of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, which is really interesting because AIDS kind of, again, halted that, okay? And then basically put through this fear within this generation, whether they were aware of it or not. Maybe they were young, okay? They could have been, let's say, in the later time, okay, in the if you were born in like the 1970s, you're probably like only 10 or 12 during that time. But regardless, you know, there's this fear within Virgo that they're working through, okay, as a generation as a whole, around health, okay, around healing, around, again, not being hypochondriacs, not worrying too much about your health, not being overly critical is a huge thing that this generation is learning to do. And basically Virgo as a sign incarnates on this planet to accept the imperfections of life. Okay, so this is a huge thing that this generation as a whole is working through. They're working through acceptance around imperfections within the earthly plane. Okay, so this is a huge thing because Virgo wants everything to be perfect. Okay, so let's say like they're recording a video like this and there's one thing that's off. They're going to spend the whole day recording the video until it's perfect, editing the video until it's perfect, and still they might find something that they don't like. Okay, that's just Virgo as a sign. So this is basically the whole generation. Okay, the whole generation is clearing this karma, learning to be more relaxed, I guess, in that sense, you know, for lack of a better word, but that's really what that is. They're learning to be more accepting, I guess is the better word there. Learning to be more accepting of basically imperfections, okay, and not only in their lives, but on the earth plane as a whole. Okay, so this is a huge thing that they're working through, and it's interesting because with the second pandemic that came through, it kind of triggers that original, I guess, fear or wound, because it's a wound in the generation. This is the main thing to understand. It's the generation as a whole. They're clearing this wound or fear around health and healing and all these sorts of things. People within this generation might have been really interested in again, working within the health or healing industry themselves. I find a lot of alternative healing probably started with this generation, okay, putting forward alternative healing ideas and methods, okay, so there's a lot of healers, okay, who are mainstream that probably lived during that time, okay, and put through their ideas. So this is a huge thing to understand. So this is really what Virgo is about, okay, we have to look at all of these aspects, and this is really what that generation incarnated here to clear. They basically came here to clear and break through, because Pluto breaks through, okay, so they came to break through any sort of fears around health, any sort of fears around healing, any sort of old belief systems around health and healing, okay, so they could have brought through alternative healing. I mean, they did start, okay, and every generation is basically helping the next generation to come. So that's really what Pluto and Virgo came here to do, is they came here to bring through alternative healing and to be more vocal about it in that sense, and to say, hey, this doesn't work, this does work, and all these sorts of things. It could have, even if you have Pluto and Virgo, you could have a huge interest in this. It could just be a theme within your generation or within people who are within your generation, but you have the shadow aspect of that, okay? So there's always the shadow aspect within that generation where it's like you could have gone in the complete opposite end. So alternative healing could have been something that started, but maybe you could have gone in the opposite end where you don't want to accept this at all. So there's that aspect within the generation as well. You always have two things playing out all the time. You have the light aspect and you have the shadow aspect. So the shadow aspect of Pluto and Virgo is wanting to hold on to the old ways of doing things, and wanting, especially Virgo as a sign, they are very much about routine. They don't want to really do anything new, because again, it kind of triggers just like that aspect within them that just like they're not comfortable in anything that's not in a routine. Okay, Pluto in Virgo, or Virgo as a sign, but probably this whole generation is very much about the routine, very much about the structure. I mean, even if we look back to, you know, back in the day, when I say back in the day, I mean before the pandemic, right? Before these last 2 years, everything was really structured. Okay, everything was really structured. That's very much Pluto in Virgo energy. They want to do everything the same. They want, you know, even if they work at a job, they're going to do it the same way. Even if someone new comes in and they want to do something different, that's going to trigger them because they want it to stay the same. Okay, so this is a huge thing with Pluto and Virgo as well, and that's what they're working through. That's the irony. It's like the thing that they're most comfortable in is the exact thing that they're working through. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people who were born within this generation really struggled with the transition to, let's say, work from home, because that threw them out of their routine, okay, threw them out of the comfort zone. Pluto loves to be comfortable as a sign. They're the hermits, okay? So in the tarot, they're actually depicted by the hermits, and they just want to be in their own bubble and their own shell. They don't like change, okay, as a sign. This is as a sign as a whole, okay? They don't like change. They want everything to stay the same. So I'm sure that really shook them up, okay? That probably really shook them up when everybody, let's say, had to make that transition to start working from home. I can imagine that probably again threw them off, okay, because it takes them a while, because Virgo as a sign, it takes them a while to get into a groove, and then when they're in that groove, they're going to be in that groove for a long period of time. So a lot of people who are born in this generation, I would say more so like the boomer aspect of the generation, so like the earlier Pluto and Virgo, because in Gen X it already kind of started transitioning, but it's called boomers too, actually, according to Google. Okay, so in that aspect of the generation, they probably, again, wanted everything to be the same, stuck to everything, doing everything a certain way. Like I mentioned, even if someone comes in and they want to do something different, again, they don't want to do that. Okay, they don't want to do that. They want to just have everything be the same because they know it works. Okay, so this is the thing with Virgo, but they're builders. They really are. They probably, like I said, accumulated a lot of wealth as a generation as a whole. They probably, again, really learn the system really well. Okay, so learn how to, purchase a house and purchase the next house and all these sorts of things. That's really Pluto and Virgo. They were really good at the earth plane. Okay, everything to do with the physical plane is Pluto and Virgo's domain. But the main thing they have to understand is to, again, allow room for growth is basically what that is. So what tends to happen is if you don't allow room for growth, well, then in that case, you basically got shaken up. Okay, so I find that there's always two things going on with each generation, especially with this one in particular. You probably have that group that were very much, again, into alternative healing or like the new way of doing things, really taking the Virgo aspects and applying them in the light side. But then you probably have that aspect of the generation that just like wanted everything to stay the same and wanted everything to constantly just be the way that it was. So, there's always two things going on, but this is really the huge thing with Pluto and Virgo. And like I mentioned, I'm sure that now what tends to happen is if you don't want to change or if you don't want to get out of your comfort zone and it's time, the universe is going to push you out of your comfort zone. So that's really what that is. So that's really Virgo as a sign. Okay, they're the healers, they're the natural healers. Like I mentioned, there's probably a huge energy around sacrifice with them, but in the negative aspect, they had to basically learn to not put others ahead of themselves. Okay, so that's a huge thing with Virgo as well. Virgo wants to please everybody, they want to be of service to everybody, but then they kind of end up being depleted at the end. So that's a huge thing with Pluto and Virgo. They basically have to learn to start to put themselves first and start to take care of themselves and start to connect the mind, body, spirit for them. Because again, they could be too much about the physical plane and everything that's happening in the physical reality that maybe they don't have interest in the spiritual aspects, even the mental or emotional aspects. Okay, because again, Pluto's an earth sign. Okay, so this is a huge thing with this generation. The huge karmic lesson I would say for them overall would be learning to put themselves first, learning to take care of themselves, learning to incorporate mind, body, spirit in their lives. I'm sure a lot of people who are in this generation now are probably more interested in mindfulness, meditation. I'm seeing yoga, all these sorts of things. So that could be a huge thing that this generation is really into now, but it took them a while to get there because again, it's one of those things like if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of thing. That's the mentality with Virgo as a sign. If it works and it's working, they're going to stick to that and they're going to kind of just go about their way and go about accomplishing whatever goals they have. Okay, so that's a huge thing. Working through any sort of karmas around fears around health, okay, and illness and healing and learning to heal, looking at different ways to heal, maybe even being in the healing world yourself. Okay, so that's a huge thing. But the main thing I would say, and what's really coming through strongly, is that this generation really had to learn to put themselves first before they put anybody else first. Okay, that's a huge thing for this generation. Okay, so to not allow yourself to constantly be tending to everyone around you, and then it's at your own expense. So that's a huge thing. And the perfectionism is a huge thing with this generation, to not be overly critical and to just come out of a routine and to come out of the constant day-to-day that basically makes your energy stagnant. Okay, but that's the thing with Virgo as a sign. They like this. Like I mentioned, it's the hermits, so they enjoy this time to be introspective. They might not actually be like introspective in terms of thinking about anything really, because I don't think that was a huge thing during that time, especially like self-care and healing and all these things like self-healing, and like really it wasn't really a huge thing during that time. I don't think there was a focus. I think they were really focused on building, and then you probably had those individuals who again were interested in other things and alternative things. So that's the huge thing with Pluto and Virgo as a generation, and really clearing perfectionism in terms of being overly critical of the world around you and learning to accept the imperfections in the world around you is a huge thing for Pluto and Virgo, I would say. So those are the main things for this particular generation that I would say that they all incarnated together to heal, to clear, and to learn as the karmic lesson is huge, okay, for this particular generation, and to basically allow themselves to have that leeway, to have more room for fun and playtime, and not so much in like the childlike sense, but in the sense to allow yourself to be creative or to just explore other aspects, because Virgo can go into this if they do have that stability and if they do have that foundation. They can really be creative in that sense sense because, like I mentioned, they do bounce off of Pisces, so they are highly psychic. Okay, and psychic, intuition, all these sorts of things really is where the creative energy comes from. Okay, so this is a huge thing for Pluto and Virgo. This is my first video in the Pluto series. I do hope that you guys did enjoy it. If you did, please do like, share, and subscribe. You guys can let me know in the comments below, and I hope you all have a beautiful rest of the day.